3, 4. Oh, here we go. I think that's good. Let's see. Is that working now? All right, Kevin, what's your prediction? Adolfo versus Kanan.
I have no idea.
What are you talking about?
I mean, we talked about it, and I based my decision.
You don't even know who Adolfo Vieira is.
I think
you know who Adolfo Vieira is?
I have a mental image of him, and he's very intimidating in my brain.
Yeah, that's the right guy.
And based on that alone, I kind of just made my decision.
You know what's funny about him is that, I mean, if he talks a lot of trash, I've never really heard him. Like, I've never seen him try to be intimidating. He just is. You know what I mean? It's like a lion just being a lion, intimidating. Right? That's kind of like what he reminds me of. He doesn't have to. He's like menacing, but not in a like he doesn't try to force that at all. You know, he just is menacing.
He has a reputation.
I mean, he's totally. Everything he does is totally legit and legal. You know, like I don't think he's ever done anything that I've seen that's like dirty in any way. He's just physically like.
He has a reputation as a winner, not as a. Does he have a reputation as a?
He's like a 5-time world champion. He won Abu Dhabi.
But like
he got second at Absolute.
But some world champions are like they have a style, maybe a finesse about them. Like the Mendez brothers versus Marcelo versus Hodger, they have kind of like styles.
Adolfo's style is like search and destroy.
Smash?
Search and destroy. He's very smashy. Like if he's on top, I mean, everyone that they interviewed for this match is saying it's one. Who's number one? It's on Flow Grappling right now. The matches I don't think have started yet. Although maybe Cody Steele and Ty Rotolo are going right now.
What's Kanan's style?
Kanan is pretty slick. I would say that he moves kind of like a lightweight. You know, he's very quick, very light. He's very good at taking the back. You know, in scrambles.
Yeah.
But he also has a lot of power. I mean, he was able to beat Nicky Rodriguez. You know, and kind of. You know, Nicky Rodriguez tried to, I think, beat up a lot of people. You know, just his style is a very kind of brutal style, and you know, Kanan was not having that. So he can be physical when he needs to be physical, but he's also pretty smooth.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's very technical. He's like he's a nice mix.
That's typical matchups, isn't it?
I mean, he just, you know, he's 22 years old. He moves he's like a cat, you know, he's like a big cat.
Well, it's like Galval, right? Like he's a tank that moves like a gazelle.
All these guys, I mean, the big guys in jiu-jitsu are often, yeah, like big cats.
I don't know. Gordon's not really cat-like though.
No. Because like Gordon just basically stays on his butt. I mean, he might flirt a little bit with some standing. I mean, he can stand.
Yeah.
But
he
just...
He's like if a tree was a person, he would be like Gordon Ryan.
He just kind of, walks around. He's not smooth.
He's not gonna like, you know.
You know what he does? You know what he strikes me as? He's a guy who put on a lot of weight quickly,
yeah.
and was not somebody who struck me. I mean, he was very skinny for a long time.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he got really big. Whereas when you look at some of these other guys, you know, they're natural heavyweights, and they move naturally. You know, even I don't know what other regimens they're on, but they have an athleticism about them.
Or like you've kind of been the bigger guy your whole life, and I don't know, I mean,
you can't argue with Gordon's success, but
yeah, but
you know, when he fights, his matches are often with him seated. You know, he'll play a little bit of standing, but I think his takedown game is more about coming up off of the guard.
Yeah. What does that do to his body type?
Oh, he's got very long arms, very long legs. He's able to do collar ties from a seated position.
Yeah.
He's very effective. He's very effective about. I mean, that's the thing about Gordon is that his game is pretty unconventional. You don't see too many people competing like Gordon competes, you know, with that seated guard. The only guy I could think of that's really like that was Marcelo, although Marcelo was a beast on his feet.
Yeah.
You know, Marcelo definitely would get you in that single and run the pipe on you. That's what he was famous for.
Yeah.
And that arm drag as well.
Yeah, he basically defined that niche for the longest time. Still does.
I actually think Gordon's game is a lot like is a lot like Marcelo's.
The style, like
It's almost you know his butterfly guard,
back takes,
arm drags. You know he has a shoulder crunch. That's the old Marcelo game.
Oh, you mean the Gordon Ryan?
No, it's the Marcelo. Whatever.
Oh, can we talk about that?
What?
The naming convention for Jiu-Jitsu.
Sure.
I don't know. Do you like it? Do you have opinions about it? How do you think moves should be named? Should moves have names?
I think all moves should have names, and
All moves. That's a lot of moves.
well,
Like, how do you partition every?
I mean,
move?
you could just give them all like John does, and give them all their Japanese names, if you knew Japanese.
Yeah, but could you really give a name to every single type of human movement possible?
Of course you can. Yes.
A useful list?
Well, I mean, at
that
some
is
point you get into the
memorable.
Japanese do this too, where the Japanese translation is modified.
It's like a system.
This, you know, like
Yeah.
modified katagatame. So,
But like now, in Jiu-Jitsu, that's more of a thing, so it like almost gets its own name, right?
the only thing I would say is about naming something after a person is it's a little bit confusing, right? Like, hey, do the Marcelo, you know, like Marcelo's good at a lot of stuff, so at any moment you said do the Marcelo, you might be confused.
Yeah, but what I really like about that is that's the point, right? Sometimes you name something for the sole purpose that only your team knows what you're saying.
Well, maybe that's true, but do the Marcelo is probably not going to.
Well, no one's gonna yell "do the Marcelo" because you might as well like yell "do Jiu-Jitsu," you know? do Jiu-Jitsu better than you're doing. Thanks. Sound advice.
Be more like Marcelo. Be better at Jiu-Jitsu. No, I think actually, you know, Eddie Bravo's. We're watching. We're doing dual screening right now. We're trying to watch the Who's Number One, and they have Eddie Bravo on there as a commentator.
Is that happening now?
No, they're doing replays of old matches. But you know, the one thing I shouldn't say one thing. One of the many things that Eddie Bravo needs to be given credit for is that he was one of the first to try to, you know, give a lot of names to a lot, you know, comprehensively naming every part of his system, and with crazy names, right? But he was one of the first to really do that.
It's like, but the cool thing about the crazy names is like, if you heard it, you kind of knew where it came from, right? As soon as you hear like crackhead control or anything that sounds remotely similar, you're like, oh, it's like a 10th
That's
Planet.
a 10th Planet move.
If it's like, you know, a drug reference or some sort of other, I don't know.
Yeah, they have a style.
It's a,
They have a style.
and like different camps kind of have their own flavor of how they name things and their own system of, even like their technical approach to what jujitsu is or what good jujitsu is.
Well, people have their different kind of focuses, right? Like their strengths.
Well,
So
do you remember when leg drag didn't exist? Leg drag as an idea, as a position, because it's like not even really a position, but it's kind of a position now, but it didn't used to be a position, right? And like,
leg drag to me, I associate with Hoffa Mendes. I associate that with the Mendes brothers.
sure.
And Kean Cornelius, he was like one of the early progenitors, or I don't know about progenitors, but yeah, they were some of the first in my consciousness that were like really good at leg dragging.
Yeah.
Right?
So, like, as far as who are you able to give credit to a single person, or does the community tend to give credit to just whoever is best at that typical thing, or whoever like?
I'm trying to think. There were other people who did leg drags. I mean, that was a thing.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's somebody that I just don't know. I was not really focused on sport jiu-jitsu at that time.
Yeah.
I was like, what is this? Like, I remember seeing it and being like, what do you mean a leg drag?
Right.
Right? Like, why would I even be in this position?
Exactly.
But if you play De La Riva,
Makes sense.
you're probably going to get in that position.
Yeah.
And you're very super flexible, right? Usually if you get me in that angle, leg drag just means you pass my guard.
Yeah.
But it's not just a position, it's also like a technique, right?
It's like it's a system. It's its own little like thing that you can build stuff off of. Or maybe it is a thing that was built off something else that I don't realize.
I mean, I remember John doing some things that were very, from a stack position into a kind of a drag position, to like a leg drag. You wouldn't have called it a leg drag, but
Well,
it was very similar.
Stacking used to be so much more popular. Then it fell out.
Back when people did real jiu-jitsu.
And then now leg drag is the cool new thing.
Well, it's really hard to stack people now, especially when they're so bendy that stacking them doesn't just lets them roll back and face you.
Well, if you stack them right, you just keep them from rolling back.
You just gotta keep them stacked.
Keep them stacked, or let them roll through and take the back. It's fun. Anyway. But
yeah, I think there's value in naming positions and naming techniques. And, I mean, how do you have an intelligent conversation to really think about anything if you're like, what's the move? Oh, that what? I mean, well, your arm's here, and your head's here, and your leg's there, and his leg's over here.
Yeah.
You know, you gotta, each time you talk about something, you gotta like recreate it either between the two of you or like go find some video of like it happening.
Mm-hmm.
So,
do you think the naming process, like, do you think jiu-jitsu is kind of like pretty much all the same within people, like between people, and like the people who are best able to describe the patterns are kind of like naming things and making systems, and then, you know, especially like the ones that are successful tend to rise to the top, but oh man.
what are you trying to say, Kevin?
I don't know. As far as
Who gets to name things? Is that what you're trying to say? Like, who's the? Because we don't have one person. We don't have like an organization.
that's the thing. Like,
names things.
there's not like a panel of people
Right.
who can decide what.
This is jiu-jitsu is extremely decentralized, and you're going to see some people like John and Gordon who are going to call things one thing. You know, you have Eddie Bravo calling the honey hole. You have other people calling it 411. Other people calling it the saddle. If they're catch wrestlers, probably calling it the saddle. You know, you have inside sankaku. You know, you have all these different terms, right?
Do you think it's better to have like a commonly accepted term, or is it better to have like different names for things between camps, or is it?
I think it's almost impossible to expect in jiu-jitsu that anybody will agree on anything. So
I used to remember my instructors would have fights over whether or not a sweep was a flower sweep or a pendulum sweep, and that.
I mean, we kid each other over stuff like this all the time,
But
right?
like, but I don't know. It's interesting, like, because.
Well, you know, what's 100 kilos? I mean, some people it's 100 kilos is one thing.
Yeah.
Other people it's like a whole mess of things, and something maybe.
Or
You know,
sometimes it's like this like tiny little difference that is
Yes.
maybe seemingly arbitrary, but like
is
maybe
so
not.
important to somebody who's really good at it, or not.
Do you
I think regardless of what system or what kind of nomenclature you're using, that there should be some nomenclature, right? I think that is a good thing.
But like, if
And I like that we're going towards that. I also think it's a good thing to, you know, we're moving towards everyone's putting out their systems,
yeah,
right? So John put out all his systems,
yeah,
and then Andre Galval is now putting out all of his systems, and then you've got a whole, you know, like Sanjay put out his system. You know, like everyone's got their closed guard system now.
or like, is it like if I do a lot of work in this one position and I advance the technique in a way that is familiar to me and individual to me, and it works, and let's say it somehow becomes famous.
Sure.
Do I get to name it after myself? Every because it's got like you know all the guillotine types. You have the Marcel team, Hinger team.
Yes.
Like all different people have their own different guillotine
Yes.
named after them.
And now it's gotten to the point where nobody knows what anything is anymore. Right?
But like, it is kind of nice because as soon as you say Marcellotine, I know what type of guillotine you're saying, so it is kind of easier to communicate.
But there's overlap too, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
sometimes people call something different that is the same
I still don't know the difference between a Darce choke and a Bravo choke.
Well, Bravo choke is with the E. and
But like
Darce choke is
it's the
with
same
E. Or
choke.
you could-
It's the same. If it's the same thing, and they're both head-on triangles.
No, Bravo is not a head-on triangle.
Bravo is a head-on.
No, that's more of a I mean, it can be, right, if you could get the arm across, and then it becomes a lot more like a Darce. But it could also just be like a straight, not a straight, but like a cross choke. So, well, I don't think, the thing is that things are named after people because they do them in competition, usually at a high level with,
Recognition.
for like when things are on the line, right? Like when it's a championship match.
Okay.
But the people who come up with it are not necessarily the people who are competing. Like John, I think everyone agrees, was the guy who kind of like
Invented the Darce.
taught the Darce to Joe D'Arcy, right? And because Joe hit it on, I forget even who he hit it on, but he hit it in competition. The first time people had seen it, he got the name, right?
Yeah, but I love
they
how
don't call it the Danaher,
but they
which
don't
doesn't exactly trip off the tongue.
But they don't even call it after, like, it's kind of sounds like his name, but most people.
No, because even when he was competing, people would still mispronounce his name as Darce.
Yeah.
Because they didn't know it was DRC.
I think that's great. I think that's funny.
But that's jiu-jitsu, right? Like,
Yeah. It just so happens that he has like a interestingly spelled name, and now everyone says this one choke in a very specific way that has a loose connection to this guy who learned a thing from this other guy who didn't necessarily invent it himself.
he doesn't claim that he invented
But
it.
he
Kind of
taught it.
rediscovered it, I think is kind of the best thing
Yeah.
that he would say. Because I'm sure you could go into whatever old video and see some, old Japanese guy Darcying somebody, right? Or Bravoing somebody. Cody, and
Can I invent techniques?
can you invent techniques?
Yeah. How does one create a technique?
Well,
Or how do techniques get created? That's a fun one.
well, the Darce is a good one, right? Like John tells a story of how he created or came up with that, and he was just basically playing around. Like, okay, well, he knew how to do, a head and arm triangle, which had been around for, probably since the very beginning of people wrestling, right? And he was just like, hey, can I? And I think he knew about trying to think of it, he was like thinking about it from a triangle perspective. You could do like a reverse triangle. And then he was like, hey, what can I do this with my arms? And so it's like, it wasn't even necessarily a problem. It was just because sometimes it's a problem. Like sometimes you're like, I'm running into this roadblock.
Yeah.
And like you reason your way to a solution.
Really?
Yeah. Or maybe sometimes you just do it. Sometimes you're just training and you just hit something and you're like, okay, what did I just do?
Like, did it happen? And then he's like, oh, like this is a thing, or was it like?
Well, John would very much. There were some of the videos that were around for a long time with John of him kind of experimenting with things at Henzo's.
Yeah.
He just has that kind of mind where he's like,
Tinkering.
okay, well, here's something that works. Can we do this in a similar way from a different angle?
Yeah.
And he's also always been a kind of what's the right word I want to use? He doesn't mind going, like back when jiu-jitsu started, and for a long time, it was like jiu-jitsu's the best, judo sucks, wrestling sucks, catch sucks, all this every other martial art sucks.
Kool-Aid.
And jiu-jitsu's the best, and we come from jiu-jitsu. We don't have any history, Saint Elio came down from the mountain, and rendered unto us the laws. But John was very interested always in kind of plundering and learning from other martial arts. Whatever worked, he would try to play with. So I'm sure that the Darce, if you went into some catch wrestling old texts and videos, you probably see Darce in there somewhere. Would be my guess, because it's kind of like a front headlock. It's something natural that you would do off of a front headlock.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is the case. I'm not, but I'm saying he has that kind of mind where he makes connect. He looks, he tries to find out. Every time I saw him, if he wasn't on the mat, he was on the computer.
Mm-hmm.
Like looking at video. And so, or other things, I don't know. I mean, I think, no, not like that, but, you know, he has a very curious, open mind, you know, and so, and he, you know, so he would go out and he would try to figure these things out, you know, and then he would come bring it back onto and of course, you know, he would put his own twist on it. You know, he'd play with it. It would never be just him, you know, slavishly following or trying to do. It's kind of like, you know, we watch videos and then we come and try the techniques out, right? It's like every time there's some crazy new technique on YouTube, somebody comes in and tries it. Or you know, I may be like, hey, I want to try this out because I saw this. Let's see if it really works. John was doing that a long time ago, but like when it was
cool. Before it was cool.
Before it was cool. And so I think he learned a lot from other martial arts, but then he would use his own kind of, you know, powers of reasoning and experimentation to figure out like how do these things work on the mat in a jiu-jitsu context.
I don't know. I feel like it.
But other people just hit things randomly, right?
Yeah,
that's not his way. He's not a random person.
It's
you know?
more organic in my experience. Where like you're rolling with a person, a thing happens and you're not really sure why, right? And then you go on with your life, and then you're rolling with a person.
Yeah, it's not.
And then the thing happens again. Same thing happens again, right? And that's fine. You move on with your life. And then a couple days later, maybe you're rolling again. Same thing happens again, and suddenly like you've got this pattern of a thing that works for you, and you know how to cause the starting conditions to make it happen, and then you know suddenly it's a thing that you can start to build and play with. And
I think that is kind of a description of how maybe the majority of people learn jiu-jitsu, and especially true of like when you look at some of these really young, dynamic jiu-jitsu athletes. You know, they don't really have a system per se. They have a way a method that works for them that they are kind of intuitively using.
That sounds like a system.
Well, I don't know. A system to me implies that you'd be able to
write it down,
explain it, and to systematize it is to kind of like be able to lay it all out and say this piece relates to this piece relates to this piece.
I feel like it's laid out every time they do jiu-jitsu.
No, but like to actually articulate it and teach it. Right?
Yeah.
Like so they have, and it's not just so it's like you could say Ted Williams could say like in the greatest, I don't know if you know who Ted Williams is, like the greatest hitter in Major League, one of the greatest hitters, last guy to hit 400, but he could show you, right? Like if he showed you, okay, this is how I swing the bat.
Yeah.
Okay, you could swing the bat theoretically like Ted Williams.
No, you couldn't.
Well, let's say you could, but there's the way that what made him so successful wasn't just that he had a really good swing.
Yeah.
It's also, you know, he had like 20/10 vision in both eyes, so he had the vision of like an eagle.
Yeah.
You know, and he could pick up the ball from 90 feet away and see how it was spinning.
Yeah.
And he had a really good working knowledge of like every pitcher's tendencies, right? So how much of his success? And I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just saying when you look at these athletes, they have a certain combination of characteristics and experiences that are not prone to being systematized, right?
Yeah.
Like this system works if you have great vision and you know you like to study, you know, the tendencies of pitchers, you know, in every given situation. You know, Mike Tyson was like that. He would study he was like a student of the game. But like, hey, just go learn what everybody does that's not a system.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like, I don't think personally that jiu-jitsu can ever be completely systematized.
Maybe not.
Like
no, because then we would just be robots, right? We'd all just like A plus B, you know.
Well, no, it's just because we're not robots. Like
well, there's always room for improvisation, right? Like there's always creativity. You know, whatever you learn, even if you are learning a system, like everybody who learns like kind of modifies to some extent. That's why.
Well, it's not even that. Like once you're aware of the system that you're doing, it is inherently modified because like now it's something that you have like conscious control over. You can change it. Like just by being aware.
Yes. I mean that's why if you look at like, you know, John's athletes, they don't all compete the same way. They actually look very different in how they articulate that system, but they're all very well versed in the system, right? It's just that I don't think that Gordon competes the way that Gary competes, who doesn't compete the way that Nicky competes. You know, like Craig is different. They all have their own
expressions of whatever the system is, right? So it's not like it's uniform, right? It's not like, oh, you will do exactly this in this situation and do it this way. They all have their different articulations. You know, that's being in the system or knowing the system doesn't mean you have to like robotically or slavishly follow it in all its particulars. But it's just like a series of tools and principles and strategies and mechanics and just understanding. It's kind of like like an artist. You know, all the artists kind of use the same paints in any given period, right? Same materials. They may even go to the same schools and learn from the same masters. But their expressions in their own personal art are going to be, their personal, going to leave their personal stamp on things.
Yeah.
At some point Picasso was just painting pictures of like grapes on a table in a hyper-realistic fashion. It was only over time that he went through his different phases as an artist.
I guess I've always shied away from like studying certain systems.
But you have systems. You have a system. You have your system of doing Kimuras, and you have your system of doing arm locks, and
but
your
it's just
system.
like I didn't sit down and think about it, right?
No, you iterated over time, but the
just
difference.
happened.
The difference, I think, is that as an individual athlete, for your own benefit, you're going to kind of come up with your own personal system of how you like to do things in whatever situation you find yourself in, or force the situation to be. But when you're a coach, and you're trying to whatever system, whatever coach or team you have, the coach is there to kind of show you how to do things the right way. If you're playing basketball, it's like, how do I shoot a basketball the right way? How do I run an offense? You have plays. That's what a coach does. So the coach has to be able to express or articulate like what they want the players to do in order to win.
But when I coach things, I'm not saying like this is the right thing. I'm saying like this is a thing, right? And then
Well, you need to get a little more confidence about what the
well,
like so like John, who I think is kind of the best coach that's around, one of the best coaches, I should say. He would. There are lots of times where he says, "Hey, listen, there's a couple different options that you can have here, but these are the best high percentage options that you have to choose from. You pick which one you like. That's fine. He's not like do this, then this, then this, then this. He's just saying like, okay, here are the things that you can do that are high percentage from this position that have proven themselves to be efficient and effective at a high level.
Yeah, I'm still just really hesitant about saying like things are the right things or ways to do things, like the correct
Well,
way.
then
Like I feel like
you're wrong and he's right.
No, it's like when you're teaching jiu-jitsu, it shouldn't be this is what you should do. It should be this is what one can do. This is why one would do this.
Well, I think it's true enough that you could say that this person can do this thing, and this person, I like to think of it as there are many right ways or solutions to the problem, but then there are a lot of wrong ways too.
Yeah, but like, do we spend our time teaching everything that you shouldn't do? Like, you kind of
Not everything, but a lot of things you shouldn't do.
Pick a couple big things, but you can't go through the entire list.
No. I think the idea is that you would say you can do, different people will do different things in different situations, right? Or the same thing in different situations, maybe. But the idea is that there are a couple of different high percentage techniques that you can do from, not to say that these other things don't ever work for anybody ever, right? But rather that these are the techniques that almost always work in the most situations for the most, athletes, at the highest level.
The most athletes, or the most people, or the most white belts, most blue belts, most purple belts, like.
Well, you can add as many variables as you want, right? Like, you can teach a white belt anything, but if you say like, okay, the white belt, I'm going to put you in with the black belt, it's like nothing that the white belt does is going to work unless they're a former D1 athlete of some sort who has the physicality to like impose their physical will on somebody regardless of technical merit.
Yeah.
Right? You can have that person, right? You can have the blue belt who's just such a beast,
or so flexible or so fast that they can get away with things. But that's more of an attribute-based way of teaching. You know what I mean? Like I don't think of like Nicky Rodriguez. Like he does certain techniques really well, but I don't think of him as a super technical athlete. I mean, he's a beast and he imposes his physical will on people.
Yeah.
He does so in a pretty technical manner, but I wouldn't be like I probably would not buy Nicky Rodriguez's instructional materials. Maybe for wrestling I might if I were a wrestler.
I just think there's especially for the fundamentals, there are so many different ways you could approach each position, and it would go down different ways, different systems, right, per situation that could all be considered fundamental. Think about all the different things that you could do from mount or side control. Even side control.
From top or bottom?
If you're on top.
Well, top is different than bottom, right?
Well, that's the thing. There's so many different things that you can do on top. What 3 moves do you consider to be fundamental when they're a couple?
Neon belly.
Neon belly, okay. But neon
That's
belly
one.
is it itself a position? So does that get its couple of techniques per, or because you can keep branching into different sub positions per position.
If you're asking me what. If I see somebody it depends also on what is the context, right? If it's a tournament, right?
We're just
in
saying
a gi tournament.
Good jiu-jitsu.
I would say that it's never a bad idea to put your knee on somebody's belly. It's always a good idea. You can just go and you can look and say, okay, from cross side, here are the highest percentage,
But what do you base highest percentage on? When you're teaching, it's not like you're citing statistics from anything. You're just basing it on your past history of being taught things and your own intuition based on your own experiences. It's not that precise, I don't think. It's just, what are the 3 best things that you would do here? That's what I feel like.
Well, it's also what's the given situation? Am I up by a point with 30 seconds to go? I may just want to keep cross-side and not do anything.
Yeah.
That might be maintaining the position may be the best thing to do if you want to win this tournament under the rule set that you find yourself in, right? So you can be high. So it's John very specifically coached all of his athletes for Abu Dhabi, right? For submission only, right? So he consciously did submission only Abu Dhabi. Those guys barely ever, you never see them in the game anymore. Not to say they couldn't, but you don't see them there. And, you see a different rule set, or a very specific rule set, and he's teaching them things very specifically for those rule sets. And I think if you look at the rule set, then you can kind of narrow it down. And that could be self-defense, right? Self-defense could be one thing. If you're in a white belt tournament, that might be different. IBJJ have a gi white belt or blue belt tournament. You may have a different set of techniques that are the most effective versus the black belt tournaments, right? If you go to a white belt, now maybe this isn't true, but let's say a couple of years ago, I think it was more true. If you went to a white belt tournament, and maybe even a blue belt tournament, De La Riva wasn't as common. Word guard was not as common. A lot of these modern guards just did not, they existed, but they hadn't penetrated into the jiu-jitsu consciousness as much. Now you go to any kids tournament, every kid's playing De La Riva. It's part of the oxygen, the air, the environment now. But there are other things now that, look, you don't need to know leg locks if you're 12 years old and going to your green belt tournament or whatever it is, right? But if you go to Abu Dhabi, you better know some leg locks and leg lock defenses because those are highly common, right? That's a very common thing now is somebody's going to try to heel hook you. So you should, if you go to a tournament that has heel hooks, well, you better learn some heel hooks and defenses.
Yeah.
So if you're going to go to EBI, I would say you better work on your back defense because you're going to be there, right? You're going to spend a lot of time. Whether you win or lose, you're going to spend a lot of time, or you should, in that position.
It makes sense strategically.
Right? So you would, if I were coaching, somebody said, I'm going to EBI, I'd be like, okay, there are very specific things that you need to be able to do and prevent other people from doing to you. And we're going to focus on them. I'm not going to spend time teaching them cross chokes. That doesn't make any sense, right? Like, why? You don't even have a gi on. Why would I even bother teaching any? I'm going to teach you some guillotines. I'm going to teach you some guillotine defenses. I probably should teach you some like takedown defenses or takedowns if you don't know them, right? I mean, you can go to each one of these things and say, in this situation, this is the best, or some of the best. You're at least narrowing it down. But I agree with you that there is room for interpretation and creativity and individual characteristics or mentality or whatever.
How much time do you spend studying versus doing? Like in terms of learning technique or getting better? Like, do you have an ideal balance that works for you that you like?
I think, when you are young and you just want to train all the time, who just healed hook over here? I think, is that Rutolo who just healed hook, Cody? Speaking of heel hooks. Was he on it? Ooh, he was. I was like, oof.
Gross.
Man.
Anyway.
As you get older, you become more, at least as I got older, and I'm started teaching more, I felt like I tried to learn more, right? But even when I was, when I didn't have an academy, and I wasn't teaching anybody, I would watch a lot of videos. We had videos of John, not the ones that we have now, but I would watch those, all the time, try to learn. People would show us, like everybody would go, we would go around and people would show new techniques that they saw or they learned, whatever. I think there's, if you were training for a specific competition, or like a group of competitions, like you have a bunch of tournaments that are coming up, you have to work more on kind of your own personal improvement of what you know already, right? You don't want to try to learn things, a new thing, a week before some tournament or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not actively competing, then you should be learning. You're trying to improve, your brain.
But like, doesn't the learning happen while doing jiu-jitsu?
Sometimes.
What do you mean sometimes?
Sometimes.
What parts is learning not happening?
I think learning is always happening. The question is it the most efficient way of learning? You have a limited amount of time in your life. And I'll say this too, different people learn different ways, right? So some people are very visual, some people are very tactile, some people want to talk about it and they can learn that way. Other people they have to see it or feel it or do it, right? And some people need some combinations of those things.
Yeah, but
so it's hard to describe because everyone learns a little bit differently.
yeah, but people say that in context of like school, where sometimes you learn stuff off the blackboard versus sometimes you learn stuff hearing. Like jiu-jitsu is a thing that you do. You can't speak jiu-jitsu, you can't hear jiu-jitsu. It's like, I feel like the only way to truly learn it is by doing it, right? Like maybe your knowledge of what you learned in a video can guide how you train and what you do.
Yeah.
But I don't know how much. I feel like if you only watch video and you don't do the thing.
No, that's true, right? If you only do one thing, unless you're the Punisher. Was it the Punisher? Who's the guy that can just learn like
Taskmaster.
The Taskmaster. Master.
Taskmaster.
The master. I don't know.
He masks tasks.
He masks the task. I mean, I agree, right? Like it's not either or.
Yeah.
Some people go in the gym and they see somebody doing something or they have it done to them and they're just able to intuitively do it. Right? I mean, I wouldn't presume to say like the way that I learn should be the way that you learn is the best way. It's just the best way that I learn. You know what I mean? Like, and that's hard as a coach, right? As a coach, you have to understand that like the way that you think is the best is not necessarily the best way for every one of your students.
What I really like are Instagram jiu-jitsu videos, because they're like 30 seconds long. Perfect. That's an idea. That's all you need. Bam. You got that? And then the next time you roll, maybe it'll come up, maybe it won't. like a spark, a seedling that may grow in the recesses of your mind, just like a new thing. Where just like if you change, the conditions a little bit, sometimes you can make something new happen, and you get a whole new branch of your jiu-jitsu.
I think what John was really good at was saying, do this. When you're here, do this. When you're here, try this. And then it would usually work.
Yeah.
And that was like, if you find yourself here, or if you're getting stuck in this position, you do this, right? And that wasn't always how he coached. Like, he was a big believer in, like, you need to learn how to do this for yourself. You need to be able to coach yourself, to figure things out by yourself.
Yeah.
But sometimes when you're in things, when you're in the middle of something, you
just
don't have the objectivity to see what is missing.
Yeah.
Right? Or even accept it sometimes. So, that's the role of having, or that's the benefit of having a coach or a third party who can kind of more objectively see what's happening in ways that maybe you don't see, or can't see, or don't accept, or whatever it is, right? To give you that guidance, and that focus.
I feel like videos are really good for problem solving. Like, instead of like sitting down and like, I'm gonna learn worm guard, and you just watch a bunch of DVDs. It's like, you try worm guard out, like you get an idea of what worm guard is and you play with it, right? And then things start going wrong, right? And then you're like, what's going wrong? Where's it going wrong? And
You go back,
you
maybe
look
find
for
it,
it, you find it, like, and then.
How does Keenan deal with this situation? What does he do here? And then, like, he has his whole system that's laid out.
And then he says like the 2 sentences you need, you turn it off, and then you go back to drilling.
I think I think that there is no substitute for actually being on the mat. I mean, no one that I've ever met is just able to watch some videos and just go wreck shop. It's usually like how you're describing, whether it's a coach or a video or whatever it is, you get an idea, right? And you have to master the physical movements that are involved in that idea, right? It's like there have been many times where I see people do things, and I'm like, how do they even get into that position? Right? Like, how do they invert that way and still without getting smashed?
Yeah.
And that sometimes you have to learn how to move, just move your body in the way that's necessary to even get into a position.
Yeah. You might not even be aware that you don't know how to move, which is frustrating.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes I remember just the process of learning how my body worked, like how if I contract some muscles, certain parts of my body will come closer, and I don't know, figuring that out while also trying to learn jiu-jitsu techniques was often very frustrating.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
And sometimes I just needed like a year of development where like maybe I was just like my posture, I couldn't hold my posture correctly well enough when I was a white belt, and after a year of training, I was strong enough to kind of maintain the positioning necessary to do the move correctly. So it's like I had the idea, but like I still needed to develop first naturally, like just like kinesthetically.
Well, look,
kinesthetic.
I mean, I can go. This is classic. You can watch. I could watch people lifting weights all day, right? And they would make it look easy, right? Some of these, they're like 130-pound women who can put 260 over their heads, like that. And they make it look so simple, and then you go and you try to lift, 100 or 60 the way that they're doing. You're like, whoa, wait a minute, I can't even generate the power necessary to get the bar to my hips or over my hips. So, like, there's seeing and then there's actually doing. Those things aren't always the same or possible.
Well,
depending on your physical, your own physical abilities.
I used to get frustrated that like I would go to class after class after class, drill technique after technique after technique, like repeat it over and over and over and over and over again, and nothing ever worked. Nothing ever worked.
Yeah.
Like I could teach it.
Those techniques don't work, Kevin. You should have just given them up and kept doing close guard.
Well, it was just like super frustrating because it would work against a brand new day one person. Right? And then it was cool. It would feel really good when that new person would walk in, but then it would go back to not working. Right? So what happened was that technique didn't really get incorporated into my overall arsenal until like way down the line. Because the only thing I could do was turn onto my side and go like this for the longest time.
Yeah.
And then eventually all I could do was a little strength and a little get back to guard. And then close guard became a thing, and that was great.
So I think this is one of the issues when you are in a gym that is proficient or focuses on kind of one style of jiu-jitsu, and you want to learn some other style. Because even if that, and I've seen where gyms where they're like, that's bullshit, and that's garbage, and don't do it. And you're like, yeah, but Rafa Mendes just won the world championships 5 times doing this stuff.
Yeah.
And they'll be like, no, but you're not.
Rafa Mendes.
You know, memo. Did you get the memo? You're not Rafa Mendes. But if you were at AOJ, you know, you're going to have zero chance of doing any of those things. I mean, you're a white belt, right? Like you're just going to walk in and you're just going to get murdered. But you're going to see everyone in that academy doing it, and they're going to support you
in your efforts.
You know, and it's just, you know, in a way, it's the same thing no matter what style you're in. When I first walked in the first day and I tried to do close guard on people, how effective do you think my close guard? My close guard is still garbage. How do you think it was back then?
Sure, it was great.
It was terrible. It was terrible.
Close guard's not that bad.
It's pretty bad.
I don't think so.
Thank you, but I think it's awful. So, you know, but because everyone's doing close guard and everyone's doing half guard and everyone's doing this, it's like, okay, you kind of see like, okay, maybe I can't get it to work, but this awesome guy is murdering me with it, and this awesome person and this person who's not even very good is murdering me with it.
Yeah.
So then you get that reinforcement of, hey, this really works, just keep trying. And so
it is nice to have good role models.
Yes, literally role models. So, you know, but you know, like that's one of the issues of training with the techniques that maybe are not super popular in your gym. And you don't have somebody, like the best thing is when you're training, you can't get something working, you go and you can ask the purple belt or the brown belt who's really good at it, like, hey, what do you do here? And if they're really good at it, they can just show you, right? You don't have to go back to the video.
Yeah.
Right?
That is nice.
But if everyone is, it's kind of like being the gi guy in a gym with all no gi. You have no one to talk to, and they make fun of you when they do talk to you.
Yeah.
Right? So it's tough, but I think things are getting more liberal at academies about these things, because you kind of recognize there's a lot of different styles, and there's also a lot of movement of athletes between teams.
Yeah.
So they all bring their different styles.
And just like once YouTube became a thing, techniques are no longer secrets, which is
Well, now, I mean, you got video. Everyone has a video out of like all their best stuff. It's like you hit something and you win in competition. It's like all of a sudden there's a video a week later of like, here's my system of how I won, you know, my division at Worlds. Like, here's the sweep I just hit.
I mean, that's like, isn't it like the Hunger Games where, you know, you win and they parade you around for 2 weeks and then you go back to wherever you came from and you get to play again next year?
I don't
like,
watch Hunger Games or Reddit, so I don't know.
It's part of the reward, right? Like, that's part of the glory of winning is getting to show off, like, your contribution to the sport. You know, like, this is...
I think it's awesome.
This is me.
I think it's awesome. We used to like try to get DVDs of like matches, and look at them, you know, and grainy, like out of focus. Where was his foot? What was the grip here? Did he have it like this or that or here? What? I can't see. He's on the other side. Happened so fast.
Yeah. I don't know.
Now it's too much information. Now there's
it's
like
it's an overflow.
It's a glut.
But I don't know, watching jiu-jitsu and trying to, you know, glean information out of it. I feel like you almost need a person explaining the context, and I don't know, but even then, like, I feel like sometimes when I do things, like, I don't even know why I do it. It's just like things happen. And so I think it's funny, like, a bunch of guys watching a video that, you know, might just be a thing that they did at that tournament that one time for that specific reason, whatever it was, you know, not necessarily like what they would even consider to be their best or the best jiu-jitsu that they have, you know, like it's just, this is what I did today.
But you do see some people doing things over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Like that is their formula of success.
But it only counts if you hit it at the like.
Well, I mean, but it's, you know, like if you're a blue belt, purple belt world champion now, you're probably gonna be able to put a video out about your way of doing things, and people will buy it.
I mean, especially if you like do win multiple matches on your way up to the finals
With that thing.
That's even better. That's something, I think. That is.
It's hard to win anything.
It's more work.
If you go win Worlds or Abu Dhabi or whatever it is, it's not easy. Got Wagner Bocha versus John Blank right now. You know what's funny about Wagner is that he was one of the first guys. Oh, is he mounted? He was one of the first guys to do like Kimura traps, and I have not seen him even attempt a Kimura in probably his last 10 matches. This guy John Blank is pretty good.
Kimuras are out of date.
They don't work anymore.
They don't work.
Kimuras suck. Don't do them anymore, right, Kevin?
Old hat. What do you think
And flow passing too. Like he was one of the first guys talking about flow passing.
What submission do you hate the most?
I love all submissions.
No.
Like it's like asking me to choose between my children.
Nah. Well, what submission do you hate the most?
Why would I hate a submission?
I don't know, for any reason. Maybe it hurt you one time real bad, or
Only if it worked.
killed your grandma. I don't know.
I don't have any. I've like you could think of like favorite submissions, but I don't have like.
You don't have any submissions. You're just like any that
If it's a legit submission.
leave you with a feeling of disdain when people try it.
There are people who are not, well, anytime somebody tries a submission and they suck at it, it's kind of like, you suck. I don't think the submission sucks, because I know the submissions themselves work. If you're good at hitting them, then there's nothing, it's not.
All submissions are created equal? No submissions are better than others?
No, but I don't have anything against any submission. I think some submissions are harder to do than others, but I don't. I mean, if someone said, Rich, should I learn how to do a rear naked choke or a wrist lock?
Yeah.
I would say you should probably spend your time learning how to do rear naked chokes.
Are there any named submissions that you can think of that you think are never worth doing?
Ever even attempting, or not? Just not worth
like
doing. Just don't even do it.
You would never do it if someone like asked you to do it, or you know.
The only submission that well, a couple of submissions I don't do because I'm afraid of actually hurting my training partners. Are like Estema locks, and I don't like doing calf slicers.
Really?
But the kind that where you're passing and you just land on it. And I don't think of it as a submission, that wrist lock where you turn your hips and the guy has their hand. That's just, you're just gonna injure, that's like an assault. I might as well just elbow you in the face.
Yeah.
In competition, totally fine, but like in training, I just wouldn't do those submissions. I don't think they're appropriate for regular training. I think you're gonna wind up injuring your partners. And some wrist locks, I think you have to really slap on hard. Like you can't really have a gentle Estema lock.
I think if you're legit.
If you're gonna do a Estema lock, you're gonna break it.
Yeah, if you're trying to get someone to tap to the wrist lock or the Estema lock, you have to try to break the wrist. Otherwise, if you try to make them tap, they're gonna wiggle.
See, it's not even like, are you making them tap? To me,
you're breaking.
You are breaking.
Yeah.
Like there's no like.
Because if
you're really a lot better than your training partner, there are ways to get your wrist locks and be like super gentle with them.
If you're like so much better,
but if you're dealing with anybody, then you have to
break it.
You have to break it. Now, they may tap or scream out, and you may have time to let go.
But they have to prioritize not letting you break it.
That's why it works.
And the only reason they're going to prioritize that is if they think that you're going to break it. And the only way that they're going to think that you're going to break it is if you're going to break it.
Yeah.
So you got to.
And the other problem is that this is leaking into other submissions now.
What?
So like foot locks and heel hooks and
Heel
Kimuras, a lot of people, they won't tap. They want toe holds. That's a good one. People won't tap the toe holds. Top people, like if you go blue belt and above, if you're like past the second round,
You got like
no one's tapping to a toe hold.
you have like 8 pops per ankle in your life, I think. A scientist told me that.
Maybe that might be true.
That's
I
not
don't know. I only have one pop.
I don't know. I feel like I've gotten a couple of these and a couple of these, and they work more or less. But you look at the meows feet, and they're just.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to compete, and they well here I don't know how to ask this in a way that's not too loaded a question, but here's my perspective, and I'm asking your opinion, not saying that this is like my definitive perspective, but just one perspective that I can think of. In today's game where people will not tap in competition, right? Like they arms. I've seen people like not tap to like every submission, or not tap till it's too late.
Yeah.
Would you agree that it's good to coach people and train in the academy to finish submissions as viciously as possible, because that is actually going to prepare them for what they're going to face in competition?
No.
No.
I think.
As long as everyone's consenting, I guess everyone is like okay with this.
Well, if everyone's okay with it, then they can do whatever. But I think in general, like my rule whenever I teach is, I tell people that you should always assume that the other person's going to break it when you're training. Every single time, like the assumption is they're going to break it. But we should all operate under the idea that if you don't tap, I'm going to do the thing I'm doing, right? And by understanding that, you're going to prioritize tapping. You're not going to hope that I'm not going to break it. You know I'm going to break it, so you have to tap, right?
Yeah, but I don't know. In your mind structure, so I don't think you'll actually break it.
There's not going to be this misunderstanding, right? Where you thought I was going to let something go, because the general rule is I'm going to break your arm unless you tap.
But will you actually break it?
In reality, no.
That's the
I
problem.
try my best. No, like in writing, the rule is I'm going to break your arm.
Yes, but you're not actually going to break it.
But like no, that's just like if I need to, I can.
Because here's the problem, as
we
I
all
see
understand.
it, right? And I've seen this in training, not so much in competition. I haven't met anybody. I'm trying to think if I've met anybody in competition that wouldn't tap. I haven't competed that much. In training, I've had people who won't tap and have kind of surprised me in a way, because I'm like, I'm being nice to them, and then they explode out, and I'm like, oh,
That's
man.
fine. Yeah.
And my thought is just that maybe it's better to just teach people to just like follow through.
No, you shouldn't.
No.
You shouldn't teach people.
Because what if you hesitate in competition? Like you have that
It's-
arm, you have that.
I would rather
foot.
lose a competition than break someone's arm personally.
In competition,
Depends on the competition.
I'd much rather break the arm.
I don't think. I mean, again, like if you're on a competition team, like like train to break.
Okay, that's what I'm saying.
Sure.
If you're on a competition, no, that's what I mean.
That's
That's what I mean. Like
That's fair.
not just a bunch of like, you know.
It should be, those rules should be made very clear.
Yeah. So you agree?
But I think the assumption, even on like regular like hobbyist mat, should be
yes.
you're gonna break my arm.
Okay.
Time will stop.
Yeah.
Right, and then.
But like you won't actually.
I can make a personal judgment call over whether or not I can give you mercy. You shouldn't assume that I'm going to give you mercy, because that's a bad idea.
It is a bad idea.
You should tap.
You should. I
'Cause-
agree. There's no disagreement.
Because I might not. And sometimes it gets a little tricky because like a lot of I don't break a lot of people's arms, so people get used to me being merciful
Yes.
and letting things go.
And then isn't by being merciful you're creating a habit for yourself
And
of
that's-
being merciful?
And I should be aware of that if that happens, and not be like, I'm gonna break this guy's arm and feel like it was justified. You should be aware of what the other person is operating on. But at the end of the day, everyone should understand
Yes.
that I'm gonna break your arm if you don't tap. That is the underlying thing that makes the whole thing work.
Yes.
The way that like arguments don't happen. Now, it is better if you don't break your training partner's arms. It is usually better to not break your training
Or
partner's
any
arms.
other part of
Or
your
choke
body.
anything.
Yes.
Right? You shouldn't do anything to other people that you don't want happening to you. That's a good rule, very
The
popular.
golden rule.
Yeah. But it's jujitsu.
But let's say
We should
I say to
have
you,
a goal.
Coach Kevin, I say, Coach Kevin,
Sure.
I'm going to tournament,
Uh-huh.
there's going to be toe holds and everything like that.
Uh-huh.
I think we need to go super hard.
Okay.
And like, if you catch something, I want you to really, crank it as hard as you can,
Okay.
because that's going to be real competition. Like that's competition style.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to tap really quick. Like we're not tap.
Okay.
Is that cool?
Yeah,
Should I
that's
do
fine.
that?
Yeah.
Would you agree that's a good way to train?
I'll do that with you. I'm gonna lie to you, and I'm not gonna crank it, but I'm gonna pretend. I'm gonna pretend real hard, so you get, if that's what you want to condition yourself to do, like whatever.
I think it's funny because there's a group of, or at least a subsection of people who kind of take advantage of that thing over and over again.
That's fine.
Where they're like, they take advantage of the mercy
Yeah.
that they receive, and it kind of cracks me up in a way because I don't know if they really believe that this would be something successful,
Well, that's
or if
why-
they are aware that like
You gotta make the first one real.
in a competition situation, like they're probably getting something really.
I think
broken.
if you have a person who is like continuously taking advantage of your mercy, then,
Well, then you're the chump.
if they're like escaping on you, then that's your fault.
Yeah,
Like,
no, I'm not saying escaping, but like there's that.
Like you should be able to hold on to something and not crank something and not have someone escape.
Right.
But like if you were like relaxed and they got out, the next time you do it, don't relax as much. You should be able to keep them
Crank it.
confined
Crank it.
without necessarily breaking it. But you're gonna. I would typically apply slow pressure, and if I'll check on them usually, like try and make some eye contact, let them know that I think that they should tap. I don't think I've
Tap or snap, baby.
I've never purposefully
No,
broken
me either.
something.
No, I did it once.
Oh.
But I didn't break anything.
It's gross.
I didn't break anything.
I don't know, but if you think that the person.
Oh, here we go. Let's see.
But I think if you assume that the person isn't going to break their arm or break your arm, then eventually someone's going to break your arm and you're going to get really upset. So instead, if you just always assume that they're going to break your arm, you'll never get your arm broken, except in the rare instances where like major accidents happen. But if you rely on someone else's mercy, it's a bad idea.
Bad idea.
Bad idea.
Let me see if
But,
there's any.
but it's good to be merciful. I've said that.
I want to see what people are.
Do people say things?
Yeah, they do. Let's see. All right. A tattoo for each belt. No, don't. What do you think? Tattoos for each belt?
What do you mean?
That's Cameron. Cameron wants to know if you should get tattoos for each belt.
I always wanted to. I could never.
Belt
I never
tattoos.
thought
Yeah,
of-
you should get the belt like. You should get it like here, and like first your white belt, then blue,
Color
then
it.
purple,
Oh.
then brown, then black, and then just.
Well, if you do it right, you just gradually color it in and shade it.
That's what I'm saying.
Ugh. But then that first white belt is just like it's your bare skin, like pale, gross. Not yours, but mine.
Heel hooks, Americanas.
Wait, are those all comments?
Yeah,
That's crazy.
it's Connie and Cameron.
Nice.
I think if you get someone who won't tap in training, just don't release them. If they won't tap, make them get out on their own. Okay, that's what I would do. Expect if I didn't want to tap. I don't think there were any substantive questions there. I just wanted to check.
Do you think that jiu-jitsu is a state of hypnosis in which you believe that you're a murderer, and then when someone taps, you like snap out of it?
No.
No.
I'm never murderous.
No.
Rarely murderous.
Not like
Never
angry
murderous. I
murder.
never want to murder you.
Not like you just like got home and you found, assassin. Like you're just going out killing again, and you're just doing the killing thing, kill.
No, I'm like more surviving. I'm the survivor. Like I'm surviving assassination attempts.
And then someone taps and I'm like, I wake up from a dream. I was feverish and sweating, and I don't know what's going on. And then, you slap hands and you start rolling again, you get in that little flow. You're like,
I never feel murderous.
not murderous. Like, You know that I actually use this analogy a lot. Did you ever see that meme where there's this monkey holding this guy's head under the ocean, and he's like, it's just drowning this guy, like this tiny little monkey, and above it it says, it's like, hit monkey doesn't take pleasure from his job, you know, and that's how I always wanted to be with my jiu-jitsu, right? Where like I'm killing you and I'm causing you to suffer, but like it doesn't bring me joy. It just brings me closer to my goal, and that brings me closer to my dreams.
No, I take a lot of joy. I take a lot of joy.
Really?
Not in like hurting people.
Oh.
Some people.
No, I mean like in the hurting people part. You know,
but
like,
I don't really try to hurt people usually.
well,
Why
I
would you
feel
want to
like
hurt people? I like to be nice
I
to
don't
people.
try to hurt people. Hurting people
Of
has.
course you try to hurt them. That's the whole point. You're trying to hurt them.
No, the whole point is to make them submit.
Yeah, by hurting them.
No.
Or at least making them
No.
afraid of being hurt.
Yes. Because you can make a person submit without hurting them. You cannot make a person submit without threat of harm, though. You definitely need threat of harm. You know, even with chokes, it's like, I'm going to choke you unconscious.
I think you could probably put so much pressure down on somebody that even if they didn't think something was going to break, that they just can't breathe.
Oh, we're not talking about when you roll with cowards and weak people.
I mean, if Hidalgo put the pressure down on the shoulder of doom on you, I think you might tap.
The only reason I would tap is if I thought something would break, in which it would if he was doing it.
Maybe.
I think so.
Maybe.
I've broken ribs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Maybe.
tough.
But I think there's always that, no, that's not true, because I've rolled with people that are so light, but also so good, that they just kind of materialize on your back and have a rear naked choke.
Yeah, but
And I'm not afraid of being hurt, I'm just gonna go to sleep.
No, but the implication is that if you don't tap, I'm gonna put you to sleep.
Yeah, but that's not pain, that's not like,
no,
it's not hurt.
That's hurt.
It's not hurt.
That's like
Sleep is like, I've been to sleep, have you been to sleep?
yeah, but
It's like, it actually feels great.
it's definitely assault. You know, like
It's not assault.
well, if they tap and they
Well, if you keep going, maybe,
but
maybe.
if they don't
It could
tap,
still be self-defense, depending on what's happening.
how does it work if they don't tap? Is that just like they agreed and like that was just the rules?
If they don't
They just
tap.
don't tap and I put them to sleep. Because normally if they tap and I put them to sleep, that's wrong. That's assault.
Not always.
Yeah.
No, it's not true.
If they tap and I put them to sleep, that's definitely assault.
No,
That's for sure assault.
No.
Oh, for sure.
It's not.
Oh yeah,
It's not.
definitely.
I'm a lawyer here.
Okay, but okay, then go ahead. Explain.
If someone is like so, if they are assaulting you.
No, I'm talking about if we like.
No, but this is what I'm saying. Like lead. So yes, if we just have like a typical role, it's like so
Yeah.
like mundane, whatever.
And then
And then you catch or I catch you, and one of us taps, and then you keep going,
Yeah,
right?
that's assault, isn't it?
I don't know. That's actually a threat of bodily harm. I don't think that if you just have if you like break my arm, then maybe it's an assault. But if I just put you to sleep, I'm not sure that's an assault. Because I've consented to touching, right? I've consented to the
Yeah,
physical
but
part of it.
that's under the context that when you tap. I'll let
Yeah, but
go.
assault requires a threat of like real bodily harm.
Yeah, the law takes choking as bodily harm.
It can, but so what I'm saying is, you have to look at the whole context, like the factual pattern and context.
Mhm.
So yes, I mean, if you just go up to somebody and you start choking them,
Yeah.
then you're
Well,
probably
it's
going to
like,
go to jail.
it's like if
But-
you're boxing, right? You're in a boxing tournament, the bell rings. And the fight ends, if you go up and punch the guy you were boxing, like that's assault too. Even though it happened in a ring after the fight, like the context has changed.
I mean,
Like,
that's
the game
another
is over.
context.
But
That's another
that's the
context.
same.
And that's a punch.
Equivalent.
No, but I don't
That's-
think a punch is always the
I
same
think
as a choke.
legally they're taken. As
It can
serious.
be. It depends on the fact pattern, right? Like so, if I were to, let's take the example that has happened to me, right? Like the guy is like going crazy,
Mhm.
right? He's not behaving in a certainly not in my best physical interests,
Mhm.
right? And so then I put him to sleep,
But
and
that's-
he taps, and I say, you know what? This is why you were attacking me outside
That's
the
the thing.
general
That
rules.
was different.
And even though you tapped,
Yeah.
I thought that you were still a danger to me because you have been actually doing things that were harmful to me, right? Like it's like
you
think
felt
about the
like
guy,
he broke the agreement first, right?
and that's what I'm saying. Right?
Sure.
He tapped,
Yeah.
but I still kept it
I'm not
because
talking
I
about-
didn't trust him, right? I didn't trust him that he was going to actually stop. you know?
I'm talking more like a normal role where people had cooperated normally, and maybe like due to outside circumstances, I decide to ignore your tap and I
Yes.
put you out.
Yes.
I believe that is assault.
Yeah.
You don't think so? That's cool.
I don't think it's bodily harm. Just putting somebody to sleep, I don't think that actually causes any injury whatsoever.
You don't think so? Couple brain cells?
Measure.
You shrug, but
Quantify it. Now, here's the danger. If the guy has an epileptic seizure or like some, reaction to that,
Okay.
then you're screwed, right? Like then,
Yeah.
because you're responsible for, like it's like called the eggshell plaintiff rule,
Yeah.
right? Like so,
What if I have like
if I like push you down on the street, even if it's like somewhat justified, and you fall down and you have some sort of seizure disorder and you die, like I'm on the hook. Like I'm gonna probably go and owe your estate a lot of money.
Yeah. I don't know. I still think that's a clear violation.
It's not a good thing to
of
do.
agreement.
Like I would say generally I agree with you that it's not a good thing to do. But what about this one? What about, and I've had this happen where you're training and the person holds the choke or holds the arm lock or like cranks it a little extra, just a wee extra, right? But doesn't put you to sleep. How about this one? How about, we've all been here, come on. You have the person, you have the choke, they tap, you let it go a little bit. And then you put the choke back in, and they tap, and then you let it go a little bit,
That's cruel.
and then you choke them again a little bit.
That's
But you don't put them to sleep.
That's how you get people like.
You just get them a
trauma
buzz,
disorders.
Same thing with the arm lock. You have the arm lock, they tap it,
If you
and then you go again,
if you had agreed
you go again.
to do that with your training partner, SO, whatever it is,
I
like,
think the agreement is that we don't hurt each other, not that we don't mess with each other.
if you have a relationship like that is deep and long enough to where you can do that to each other, like there are friends out there who can punch each other in the stomach,
Yeah.
and kick each other in the crotch,
Yes.
and that's like
All the
how
time.
they get along.
Yes.
Fine. If that's how you get along with your friends, great. But that shouldn't be like the norm. I don't know. But you should just do that to people. You gotta.
You only do it with your best friends and your worst enemies.
I don't know. And plus, like, if you do that to your friend and then suddenly you're not friends for whatever reason, then they're like, oh, this time Rich did this thing to me, and then suddenly it's like, it puts it in a really bad light. Like, I don't know. I feel like that's.
Prove it. That would never happen.
I don't know.
Never happen.
That's pushing it. If I definitely wouldn't do that to like a new person.
No,
or
I'm not saying
to like teach someone a lesson.
No,
That's
not what
not.
I'm saying.
Because then even if you do teach them a lesson, like when they get up to lesson teaching age, they're gonna be proliferating that. And that's not necessarily great. Because like maybe you do it in the right context, but you can't help or like control whether or not an idiot does it in the proper context like you would. So it's complicated behavior like that.
Putting people to sleep is not that bad.
I agree. I definitely agree. But, this whole sport is built on trust. If I can't trust you to not choke me unconscious,
What
I
can
don't
we
wanna
trust?
with you. Yeah, it's
No,
like,
no, I don't disagree with that. I'm not saying like do it all the time. I'm just saying, like once in a
no,
while.
like you can't, no, it's unacceptable in any context.
All right, peeps.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend. I'll see you guys next week. Continue the debate. It's Jiu Jitsu Debate Club.